Let's dive into an ancient intellectual mystery. It's a kind of legal puzzle from the Talmud that pits pure common sense logic against the very specific letter of the law. And honestly, it's a case that makes you question the nature of reason itself.
So, it all boils down to this one big question. When a law seems to fly in the face of all logic, what's supposed to give? Does the law bend, or does our whole understanding of logic has to change? And this isn't just some ancient thought experiment. It's a tension that plays out in our world all the time.
Okay, so our puzzle comes from this ancient Jewish text, the Mishnah, and it focuses on a really strange contradiction in the rules for two different young cows, or heifers. The rules for each one seem to be, well, they seem to be perfectly and bizarrely upside down.
So check this out. Here is the paradox, right here in black and white. You've got the red heifer, which is used for purification. If you slaughter it, it's ritually fit, it works. But if you break its neck, it's unfit. Now look at the other heifer, which is used for atonement. The rules are the complete opposite. Breaking its neck is the only way it works, and slaughtering it actually makes it unfit. The very act that validates one completely invalidates the other. How does that work?
And right away, you're probably thinking, wait, what? That makes absolutely no sense, right? It feels totally random, a legal rule that just doesn't follow any kind of logical pattern. I mean, if slaughter is a perfectly good method in one sacred case, why on earth would it be forbidden in the other? Now, hey, we are not the first people to scratch our heads about this. The ancient sages of the Talmud, they were like the original legal detectives. They saw this exact same problem, and they decided to see if the law could actually stand up to logical scrutiny. So they pulled out a pretty powerful tool from their reasoning toolkit.
They use this type of logic called an a fortiori inference. It basically means from the stronger argument. Think of it this way. If a really picky eater eats their broccoli, which is the unusual thing, you can be pretty darn sure they're also going to eat their ice cream, the standard favorite. So in our puzzle, neck breaking is the broccoli and slaughter is the ice cream. The logic goes, since the one heifer is valid with the unusual method, then the red heifer, which is already valid with the standard method, should definitely also be valid with the unusual one. Logically, it seems unavoidable. Breaking its neck should work for the red heifer too.
And here is the huge twist. The law says, nope, you're wrong. That logical conclusion is incorrect. The original rule from the Mishnah stands. Breaking the neck invalidates the red heifer. So now we have a direct clash. Our airtight logic leads us straight to one answer, but the law says the exact opposite. So what is going on here?
All right, so the first theory the Talmud brings up is, well, it's pretty radical. They basically ask, hey, maybe, just maybe, this law isn't supposed to be logical at all. What if it's just something beyond what our brains can figure out?
So this first idea hangs on this concept of a statute, or chuk in Hebrew. And a chuk is a special kind of law. It's seen as a divine decree, one that just operates beyond the limits of human reason. The argument is basically you can't apply logic to it because it was never designed to be logical in the first place.
And they've got evidence. The biblical verse that introduces the red heifer ritual literally says, this is the statute of the Torah. So you think, okay, case closed, right? The text itself seems to be telling us, don't even try to apply your logic here.
So is that it? Is it just a divine because I said so? Is the whole mystery solved just by saying it's unsolvable? It might seem like a neat and tidy answer, but is it satisfying?
But, these sages don't just stop there. They're way too rigorous for that. They immediately push back on their own theory. They ask, hold on a second, is it really true that we never apply logic to a law just because it's called a statute? And guess what? They find a killer counterexample.
And bam, they find their answer in the ritual for Yom Kippur, which the Bible also calls a statute. But in that case, they totally apply logic to it. They only stop when a different verse specifically blocks their logical conclusion. And this proves a massive point. The word statute is not a get-out-of-logic free card. So the easy answer is out. Something else has to be going on with our heifers.
Okay, so the simple explanation is off the table. The mystery is back on. And this is the moment where our detectives find the clue that breaks the case wide open. A clue that, it turns out, was hiding in plain sight the entire time.
The solution doesn't come from some grand, sweeping theory about logic versus law. Nope, it comes from something much, much more precise. It's like a forensic analysis of the biblical text itself. It all comes down to one single, easily overlooked word.
Here it is,
The verse that describes the neck-breaking ritual. Read it carefully. Shall wash their hands over the heifer whose neck is broken. That little word whose, that turns out to be the key that unlocks this entire puzzle.
The sages interpret that word whose as a limiter, like a barrier. It means this procedure, neck breaking, applies only to this specific heifer, the one whose neck is broken, and no other. The text itself builds a wall around the rule, and it specifically keeps the red heifer out. So you see, the logic wasn't wrong. The text just created a very specific exception where that logic couldn't be applied.
So that solves one half of the paradox. And it's pretty brilliant, right? But a good detective has to tie up all the loose ends. What about the other side of the coin?
Yeah, we've got to apply that same level of rigor to the reverse question. Why can't the neck-broken heifer be validated by slaughter? I mean, that's a much more standard method. Is there another textual clue that solves that part?
And you bet there is. We look at another verse from that very same passage, and notice the language, and shall break the neck of the heifer. The text doesn't just mention the procedure, it really emphasizes it.
This repeated focus on the specific act of breaking the neck is interpreted as being totally exclusive. It's like the text is saying that for this particular ritual, it has to be done only this way and not by any other method like slaughter. So once again, it's the precise wording of the text that creates a boundary that logic has to respect.
So we've followed all the twists and turns, we've seen the theories, and we've found the solution. What's the big picture? What does this ancient legal puzzle really teach us about this whole way of thinking?
You know, the crucial takeaway here is not that logic was just thrown out the window. This was never a simple case of faith stomping on reason. Instead, the sages show us a system where universal logic is the default tool, but the precise letter of the law sets the boundaries. A hyper-specific word choice can create an exception, basically telling logic where it can and cannot operate. In this system, every single word matters, because every word has the power to define reality.
And that leaves us with a pretty provocative thought for today, doesn't it? This ancient puzzle forces us to ask a very modern question. In our own legal codes, our ethics, even our personal rules, when do we stick to the exact wording, and when do we follow the broader, more logical spirit of the rule? It's a paradox we are still wrestling with every single day.